Welcome to Fear Spiral. Liza had just moved into her new apartment in the city. It wasn't big, but it was cheap, and for a student like her it was perfect. The neighbors seemed quiet. The building was old but stable, or so she thought. That first night as she unpacked her boxes, she felt it. A strange sensation, as if someone was watching her. She laughed it off. New places always feel creepy, but then, she saw it. In the far corner of her living room, deep in the shadows, two glowing eyes, watching. Liza froze, her heart pounded like a drum solo. What was that? A cat? A rat? Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she gasped. There, sitting in the corner, was a pair of eyes. Not an animal's eyes, but a person's eyes. The face was hidden in the darkness, but Aisha could see the malicious glint in those eyes. They seemed to bore into her, and she felt a chill crawl up her spine. Adrenaline surged through her veins. She had to get out of there. She fumbled with her phone, its screen illuminating the room with sickly yellow light. Still, she couldn't see anything. Must have been a trick of the light, she told herself, just her imagination. But as she turned to leave, she saw it again. The eyes, they were closer now, and she could make out the outline of a figure, hunched and gnarled like an ancient tree root. Panic tightened its grip around her heart. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Her voice was trapped somewhere between her ribs. She backed away slowly, her eyes never leaving the corner. The figure remained still, and for a moment, Liza thought it was a statue, some kind of twisted gargoyle come to life. But then it moved. It shifted, and the eyes followed her every move, never blinking, never looking away. She ran then, not daring to look back, stumbling through the apartment, knocking over furniture, her phone clattering to the floor and shattering. Finally, she burst through the front door, gasping for breath, her mind screaming at her to run, to hide, to do anything but stay still. The eyes were still there, boring into her from their dark corner, and they seemed to mock her fear. Liza ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, until the apartment building was nothing but a dark shadow behind her. Only when the first rays of sunlight touched her skin did she stop. Then, shaking and sobbing, she called for help. But when the police arrived, they found nothing. No sign of a break-in, no missing persons, and no one in the building had seen anything. As for Liza, she never went back to that apartment. She couldn't. The mere thought of those eyes watching from the darkness was too much for her to bear. Outside, the wind howled like a hungry wolf, rattling the windows and their frames. Inside, a young woman named Liza huddled under her blankets, trying to find comfort in the dark. She'd been having the most bizarre dreams lately, dreams that bled into her waking hours, leaving her unsettled and on edge. Her breathing slowed as she tried to calm herself, but then she felt it again, that prickling sensation on the back of her neck, like someone was watching her. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She blinked. Once, twice, and the eyes vanished. Maybe it was the streetlight outside. The wind. She was tired. Yeah, that had to be it. Nothing more than her imagination, fueled by the storm and the exhaustion. She lay there for a moment, listening to the wind, willing her heart to stop pounding against her ribs. When she finally got up to go to the bathroom, she moved like a dancer, careful not to make a sound. When she returned, the eyes were still there, right at the foot of her bed. This time they were closer, and she could have sworn they were watching her. Panic tightened its icy fingers around her throat, squeezing the air from her lungs. She stumbled back, knocking over her bedside table. The crash echoed in the small room, and the eyes, they flickered, then vanished. Shaking, she got out of bed and crept closer to the window. Outside, the branches of the old oak tree scraped against the glass, mimicking claws on a chalkboard. The wind seemed to whisper her name, and the shadows cast by the streetlights danced like grotesque puppets. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, willing the nightmarish vision outside to go away. It didn't. As dawn began to break, casting an ethereal glow into the room, the eyes appeared again, this time above her bed, staring down at her with an eerie intensity. They seemed to pierce through her very being, and in that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. Something, or someone, was in her room with her. A choked sob escaped her lips as she turned to flee, but it was too late. The being with the glowing eyes was upon her, and as it reached out a hand, she screamed. Outside, the storm raged on, masking her scream from the world. Inside, the being loomed over her, its eyes boring into hers, and she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was only the beginning. Every night it got worse. The eyes would appear, and they were always there in the kitchen corner, in the hallway, sometimes reflected in the mirror. No matter how many lamps she switched on, no matter how many prayers she whispered, they were always there, just staring unblinking, as if waiting. For what? For her to scream, for her to pray, for her to beg. They were waiting for her to give up, to let go of her humanity, to become like them, to join their side. But she wouldn't. She would rather die. She would rather be buried in the desert sands than become one of those soulless beings who fed on fear and despair. They had tried to take her sanity, but she held on to it fiercely, even when they whispered sweet nothings into her ear, promising her untold pleasures if she just gave in, just surrendered to the inevitable. She wouldn't give in. She knew what those soulless beings craved, and she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. She was a warrior, and she would fight. She would fight with every breath, with every ounce of strength she had left, because she knew that if she didn't, the darkness would consume her, would swallow her whole. And then they would win, and they would feast on her soul. She wasn't sure how long she could hold out, but she knew she had to try. For her sake, for her family's sake, for everyone who believed in her, she couldn't let them down. She wouldn't let them down. Even when the hallucinations became more vivid, the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the whispers in her ear became screams. She held on until she couldn't anymore, until the darkness consumed her, until the shadows became her only company, until the silence was broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing. And then, finally, when she felt she had nothing left to give, when she was sure she would never make it through the night, she heard a voice that was like a beacon in the darkness, a light in the shadows, a whisper of hope in the silence. It said, "You are not alone. I am here with you." And in that moment, she knew she would make it. She knew she wasn't alone. A terrifying story that will make you never look at pictures of eyes the same way again. It was late at night, and Liza was home alone. Her new apartment was nice, but it was pretty isolated. The only other people around were her neighbors, an old married couple who lived in the apartment next door. Terrified, Liza asked them, "You wouldn't happen to know anything about the apartment, would you?" The old woman finally whispered, "That apartment, no one stays there long. The last tenant left, screaming in the middle of the night." Liza asked, "What do you mean?" And the old woman began to speak in a low voice. "Decades ago, a man moved into that apartment. He was a loner and he never came out during the day. The only time we saw him was when he moved in. We thought he was just a quiet guy who worked nights. But one day we heard a terrible scream in the middle of the night. It sounded like someone was being murdered. We were too afraid to go outside, so we just called the police. When they got there, they found the man burned into his bed. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly, as if he had seen something unspeakable." The old woman paused, then added in a low voice, "Since then, people say his eyes never closed." Liza thanked her neighbor and went inside. She tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had been enveloping her. Maybe it was just an old wives' tale, she thought. But as she lay in bed, she kept thinking about the man with the burned eyes. Then she remembered something. When she had first moved in, she had noticed a strange smell in the apartment, something like burnt flesh. Could it be possible that the old man's story was true? In the middle of the night, Liza woke up to a blood-curdling scream. She sat up in bed and looked around the room. Then she noticed something in the corner. It was a picture hanging crookedly on the wall. In it was a man with wide, soulless eyes. Liza stared at the painting, paralyzed with fear as the eyes seemed to stare back at her. Then suddenly, the eyes began to glow red. Liza screamed and fell out of bed. As she scrambled away from the picture, she could have sworn she heard a voice whisper in her ear, "Welcome to my home." The presence was everywhere. Liza couldn't sleep. The eyes weren't just in the shadows anymore. She saw them in her dreams. She felt them behind her when she brushed her teeth. She even heard whispers, a low raspy breath in the darkness. "I see you." It had been 3 days since the incident in the woods. 3 days since her friends had found her like that, kneeling by the tree with the eyes carved into its bark. The police had called it a crazy prank, some sick joke played by whoever had put the eyes there. But when they left and her friends had gone home, she knew it wasn't over. Whoever had done this wanted her to see the eyes, and now she did. See them everywhere, in the corners of her vision, in the reflection of shop windows, in the headlights of passing cars. They were in the shadows under her bed, watching her while she slept, waiting for her to wake up so they could follow her, stalk her, be with her always. She tried to tell her mum, called out for help, but no one could see what she saw. She was going crazy, trapped in a nightmare where the monster under the bed was real and it was coming for her. She hadn't slept in 3 nights. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her skin clammy and cold. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, rocking slowly back and forth, whispering to herself, "Go away, please, please, go away." Then she heard a knock at the door. a soft, gentle knock. She froze, her head whipping round to stare at the bedroom door. Who was out there? Was it the thing? Had it come for her? Her hand flew to her mouth as a low, raspy voice spoke from behind the wood. "Liza, my dear, are you awake?" Oh God, the voice. It was the voice from the woods, the voice of the killer. Her breathing quickened as the scratching started again, louder now, more frantic. She scrambled back from the door, falling onto the bed, pulling the blanket over her head like a shield. She could hear the scratching, feel the vibrations through the mattress as the creature outside grew more and more agitated. Then she heard the sound of splintering wood and the sickening crack of her bedroom door as it split in two. One night, desperate for answers, Liza stared into the old mirror that came with the apartment. For a moment, everything was normal. Then a face appeared behind her. Liza screamed, scrambling backwards. She hit the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd been having strange dreams lately, nightmares really, about a woman with glowing red eyes who always seemed to be watching her. At first, they'd been subtle, the dreams, just a feeling of unease, a fleeting glimpse of a face in the shadows, a pair of eyes gleaming in the darkness. But as the days went by, the dreams became more vivid, more frequent, and Liza started feeling like she was going crazy. She needed answers. She needed to know what was happening to her. And so she did what anyone in their right mind would do. They went to the one place they hadn't tried yet. The one place where all the answers seemed to be hidden. The one place that had become both a blessing and a curse. The mirror. It was an antique, ornately framed glass that had been in the apartment when they moved in. From the moment she'd seen it, Lisa had felt a strange pull towards it, a sense of foreboding, yet she couldn't look away. There was something about the mirror, something about its age, its design, its very essence that seemed to call to her, beckoning her closer, whispering promises of forgotten lore and ancient evils. At first, when she'd gazed into its depths, she'd seen only her own reflection staring back, a distorted image of herself, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide and unseeing. But then, just for a moment, everything had been normal. The apartment had seemed still and silent, and in the mirror, Lisa had seen only her own face, her own familiar features staring back at her. But then, just as suddenly, the silence had been broken. The face in the mirror had turned, its head slowly rotating to the left, then to the right, its glowing red eyes boring into hers. A smile, slow and cruel, had spread across its face, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long, too inhuman. And then the face had come closer, its grinning form emerging from the mirror, reaching out a hand with long, skeletal fingers. Liza screamed, scrambling backwards, falling to the floor as she tried to get away from the mirror, from the horror that was unfolding before her eyes. But the face kept coming, inching closer and closer until it was right in front of her, its rotting, pale flesh inches from her own. And then it had vanished, leaving Liza alone in the darkness. The only sound, her own ragged breathing. Lisa was sure that she was being stalked by a monster, a creature with glowing red eyes that appeared in her apartment every single night at midnight. Her friends thought that she was just making this up for attention, so to prove to them that she wasn't, she invited her best friend over to stay the night. At first, her friend thought it was all just a big joke. But as soon as midnight struck, the lights went out and the creature appeared, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. Its face was pale and gaunt like the face of a skeleton, and it had this one look, an endless, unblinking stare. Her friend screamed, but the creature just stood there, its eyes boring into theirs. Lisa and her friend ran from the apartment, but as they ran, they could feel the creature's presence behind them, its footsteps echoing their own. Outside, in the street, the creature loomed over them, its eyes glowing red in the darkness between the streetlights. It took a step towards them, and they ran. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the apartment, far away from the creature with the glowing red eyes. When they finally turned around to look, they saw the creature standing in the distance, its eyes still glowing red in the darkness. Then it did something unexpected. It let out a loud roar, a roar that echoed through the empty streets, and then it vanished into the shadows. Lisa's friend was terrified. She had seen the creature, too. The eyes, the face, the endless unblinking stare in the darkness. They had both seen it. As the days passed, the creature continued to appear in their dreams, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. They tried to tell their story to the police, but no one believed them. They were told to go home and get some rest, but there was no rest to be had. For every night the creature would appear, its eyes glowing red in the darkness, its face pale and gaunt, like the face of a skeleton, and it would stand there and stare at them, its eyes boring into theirs, never blinking, never moving. And then one night, the creature stopped appearing. Lisa and her friend were relieved, thinking that maybe it had finally given up on them, but they were wrong. One night, while they were watching TV, the lights flickered and went out, and when the power came back on, they saw the creature standing in front of them, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. This time though, there was a smile on its face, a wide, grotesque smile that showed its sharp teeth, and as it approached them, they could smell its foul breath, its rotting flesh, and then it lunged. She tried prayers, candles, even calling a priest, but nothing worked. The priest looked shaken after just a few minutes inside. He told her, "This is not a haunting, it is a curse. Wherever you go, the eyes will follow. They have chosen you." It all started when Liza moved into her new apartment. At first it was great. The apartment was cheap and it was big. Plus, it had an amazing view of the ocean. But then strange things started to happen. At first, it was just little things. A chair would be in the corner of the room, and then when she turned around, it would be in the middle of the room. Sometimes she would see shadows out of the corner of her eye, but when she turned around, no one would be there. Then things escalated. She started hearing whispers in the middle of the night. Sometimes she would wake up and feel like she was being watched, and that's when she started seeing them, the eyes. At first they were just little pinpricks of light in the darkness, but then they grew, taking on the shape of real eyes that seemed to watch her every move. No matter where she went in the apartment, the eyes followed her. She tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. They were everywhere, in the walls, in the floorboards, even in the windows. She couldn't take it anymore. She needed help. That's when she called the priest. When he arrived, he was a nice man with a kind face. He looked at her and smiled. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll help you." He took a few steps inside and then he stopped. His face drained of color. "What have you done?" he whispered. Liza was confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Why are you here?" The priest took a deep breath and turned to her. "This is not a haunting," he said. "It is a curse. You have opened a door that should have remained closed. Now the eyes have found you and they will never leave you." Liza was scared. "What do you mean? What do you mean the eyes will never leave me?" The priest shook his head. "You are safe here," he said. "But wherever you go, the eyes will follow. They have chosen you." With that, the priest turned and left, leaving Liza alone with her thoughts and the eyes. She knew that she could never leave the apartment now. She was trapped there forever with the eyes that watched her every move. She cried out in frustration and slammed her fist against the wall. "Why me?" she screamed. But there was no answer, only the eyes, watching, waiting. And as the night wore on, they began to glow brighter and brighter until they filled her entire vision and she could see nothing else. That night, Liza recorded herself while she slept, hours of silence. Then, at 3:03 a.m., the camera shook. The lens turned toward the corner of the room as if something was holding it. Then in the grainy footage, two glowing eyes stared straight into the camera, unblinking, closer, closer. The screen cut to black. This terrifying tale was sent to me by a viewer. It happened about 6 years ago. Liza lives in an old Victorian house with her boyfriend, Mark. They'd recently moved in and were settling down for the night. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a couple in love, a big house, and a history that was about to repeat itself. You see, Liza is a paranormal investigator. She travels the country investigating haunted houses and recording their restless spirits. This particular home had a reputation. A previous owner had contacted Liza because he believed the home was haunted by the spirit of a little girl who died upstairs in the master bedroom. He even showed Liza the spot where the girl had passed away, right here. And now, years later, the home has a new owner. But before we go any further, I need to warn you, this story gets scary, real scary. Are you sure you want to hear it? Well, if you do, then listen closely. Liza and Mark would soon discover that this place is not for the faint of heart. As the night wore on, strange things began to happen. First, their dog, who had never shown any signs of anxiety or fear, began to growl and shake. Then the lights flickered, and as they sat there in the dark, listening to the wind outside, they heard footsteps pacing back and forth directly above them, footsteps that sounded exactly like this. After hearing the footsteps, Liza set up her camera to record, and the two of them went to bed. That's when the camera recorded the little girl who had passed away in this very room all those years ago. Now, some people might call this a coincidence. I don't know about you, but I can't help but think that's pretty freaky. As the investigation went on, Liza and Mark experienced more and more paranormal activity, shaking, whispering voices, apparitions that appeared and vanished. And through it all, those eyes followed her every move. This creepy urban legend will make you never enter a stranger's apartment. The story goes back to 2013. when a young woman named Eliza moved into a new apartment in Brooklyn. But just 2 weeks after she moved in, she was never seen again. Her friends were worried and even the police were concerned, but nobody could have predicted what happened next. When they finally got into her apartment, it was completely empty. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, as if she was expecting someone to come over. But the most disturbing thing was her camera. It was lying on her bed, still recording. They looked at the footage and it showed Eliza getting ready for what seems to be a normal day. She was making breakfast, checking her messages, and even doing some yoga. But then the camera panned away, and the last thing they saw was her front door slowly opening. And in the very last frame, 2 eyes glow in the darkness. The police checked the security footage from outside the apartment, but it was too dark to see anything. And all of her friends and family were questioned, but nobody had seen those eyes. Or had they? Some people believe that the urban legend is actually true, and there really is a monster living in that apartment building. But others say it's not a monster, it's something much more sinister. A local artist saw the news story about Eliza's disappearance, and he created this painting based on the security camera footage. He says that he didn't intend to make it creepy, but the more he worked on it, the more he started to feel like he was being watched. And when he shared the painting online, everyone agreed. They started to see the eyes everywhere, watching their every move. So where are they now? Well, that's up to you to decide, because we don't know what happened to Eliza. Some say she was taken by a monster, while others say she was taken by a human. But one thing we do know, those eyes are real. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.